Previously on Patrick Explains.
How is he getting here? I never see a car outside. What the? Patrick, we need to talk about this. You've been living in the barn for months, lying to us, and only emerging to rant about movies.
We got rid of all the whiskey. You gotta stop that, son.
How did this happen? How can we help?
You know what this reminds me of?
What?
The story of a young man who was taken in by a kind family. They drank tea and ate marmalade together and taught each other so much.
Is this something from the Bible?
No, Dad. I'm talking about the Paddington movies.
I love Paddington.
So do I. These movies are masterpieces, and today, we're gonna talk about why.
Oh no.
So Mum, since you're also a Paddington fan, wanna set this up?
I'd love to. Paddington is about a young bear from darkest Peru who moves to London, gets adopted by the Brown family, and is very polite and clumsy, and tends to improve the lives of everyone he meets.
Well put. The Paddington movies are based on the children's book series by Michael Bond that began in the late 50s and are as popular in Britain as, say, Dr. Seuss books are here. So these movies are huge over there, while in the US they're moderately successful. Here, a lot of people assume they're more of the talking CGI animal interacts with live-action humans movies. You know, like Marmaduke, or Alvin and the Chipmunks, or the Smurfs, or Alvin and the Chipmunks the Squeakquel. But aside from the titular CGI talking animal, the Paddington films have virtually nothing in common with those movies. No immediately dated pop culture references, no fart jokes, no animals voiced by George Lopez. The Paddington films are part of the exceedingly rare breed of perfect family films. Like the best Pixar movies, they are equally entertaining for audiences of all ages. They don't pander to children, and they don't have stuff like this. The Paddington movies are what children's films should aspire to be. Mum, may I have a bit more tea? Thanks. All right, keep the tea coming because I am about to get into this. Now, I know I usually talk about movies where people crash cars into planes or murder vampires or get massacred by aliens, but I contain multitudes. I love a wide variety of films, and I ride or die for this little bear.
I'm not sure what that means, but I think I agree.
The first movie begins with an old-timey film reel flashback to explorer Montgomery Clyde exploring darkest Peru. There he encounters the bears who will become Paddington's Uncle Pastuzo and Aunt Lucy. The movie neatly avoids any kind of noble savage trope by making the bears already civilized and intelligent. They form a friendship with the explorer, and he instills in them a love of British culture, in particular, marmalade. These movies love marmalade so much that it honestly makes me feel bad for not liking it.
You should.
Right away you notice how high the level of visual imagination is. Both movies were written and directed by Paul King, who made his name directing every episode of the TV series The Mighty Boosh. Look at any episode of that show full of beautiful, surreal comedy and musical numbers, and you get why he was the perfect director for this. So we jump ahead in time, the bears are older and have raised a young cub. This is Paddington, not yet named Paddington. When Pastuzo dies in a tragic accident, Lucy moves to the home for retired bears, which is a totally normal thing in this world, and sends the cub on a ship to London, since Montgomery Clyde had said they would always be welcome there. So he arrives in London at exactly the 11-minute mark. These movies don't waste any time, and it's here that we're introduced to the main human characters. Now, we gotta talk about the cast in these movies because it is insane. Like Harry Potter used to be the thing that every great British actor had to appear in, and now, it's Paddington. So we got Sally Hawkins as Mrs. Brown, Hugh Bonneville as Mr. Brown, Julie Walters as Mrs. Bird, Peter Capaldi as Mr. Curry, Jim Broadbent as Mr. Gruber, and as the villain, there's Nicole Kidman having the most fun she's had in years. And the second movie ups the ante by adding Brendan Gleeson as Knuckles McGinty, Noah Taylor as Phibbs, and in maybe the best role of his career, Hugh Grant as the villain, Phoenix Buchanan, but we'll get to that later. Plus, probably due to Paul King's background in the British TV comedy scene, there's a whole parade of great comedic actors in small roles, like Matt Lucas, Jessica Hines, Alice Lowe, and Richard Ayoade. And of course, as the voices of Uncle Pastuzo and Aunt Lucy, there's Harry Potter alums Michael Gambon and Imelda Staunton. Honestly, these movies are like one Timothy Spall or Leslie Manville away from being the cast of a Mike Leigh film. And as the voice of Paddington, there is Ben Whishaw, who is the heart of these films. He's very nice, very polite, and very British. So jumping back, Paddington, not yet named Paddington, is hanging out at Paddington Station, wondering what to do when he encounters the Brown family. Now, I want to pause for a second and talk about craft, because these movies aren't just delightful and hilarious and moving and gorgeous, they are also masterclasses in economical screenwriting. In the span of 30 seconds, I timed it, the movie establishes the Browns, each of their personality, and the entire family dynamic. Every shot and every transition counts to show the passage of time during Paddington's voyage to London. Instead of just saying 1 week later, the movie has a time-lapse shot of empty marmalade jars piling up. It's a funny visual gag and it communicates information. A lot of kids' movies are lazy, but Paddington is never lazy. After all, laziness would disappoint Aunt Lucy. So the Browns name him Paddington and take him home to let him stay the night so he can find a home the next day. And here is where we really enter the world of the film. The Browns' house is like the Royal Tenenbaums' house, except here the family members actually like each other. It's all immaculately designed and the camera moves through the rooms in a Life Aquatic style cross-section view. These movies have the style of Wes Anderson, the tracking shots of Max Ophuls, the feel of Amélie-era Jean-Pierre Jeunet, the comedy of Charlie Chaplin, Wallace and Gromit and Mr. Bean, the action beats of a Shane Black script, and the storytelling and heart of the best Pixar movies. Mrs. Brown and the son Jonathan are immediately fond of Paddington since they're the most upbeat and open-minded members of the family. Their daughter Judy thinks he's weird and Mr. Brown doesn't trust him. The movie is about how, through Paddington being so good and polite and kind, improves the world around him, enriches everyone's lives, and becomes a member of the family. The movies take place in a kind of idealized storybook version of London, where kindly Jim Broadbent owns a quirky antique shop on Portobello Road, and there's a giant Geographers Guild building that looks like it was designed by Terry Gilliam. And occasionally they'll utilize animation to take the storybook feeling even further. At emotional peaks when Paddington is thinking of his home or of Aunt Lucy, the film will use a movie screen or a pop-up book to transport us inside Paddington's imagination. Anyway, while all this is happening, Nicole Kidman as an evil taxidermist is trying to track down Paddington, to stuff him and put him in the Natural History Museum for reasons that are surprisingly compelling when they're revealed later in the movie. And she teams up with Mr. Curry, the nosy neighbor who doesn't like Paddington. Now, Peter Capaldi is obviously always amazing, and he's low-key maybe my favorite character in these movies.
I love Peter Capaldi. He's the doctor, you know. He might be my favorite doctor, except for maybe Matt Smith.
But what really puts these films on another level are their third acts, because it's here that everything pays off. Every element or character or someone's skill or hobby returns here and serves a greater purpose. Every seemingly throwaway gag, from Paddington feeding marmalade sandwiches to pigeons to Judy learning to speak bear, serves a purpose in the end. Remember when I made a whole video on effective action storytelling and how it's built on reversals and setups and payoffs?
Is he still talking to us?
Well, strangely enough, the Paddington films do that better than almost any recent action movies. And what makes the third act extra satisfying is how it completes each of the characters' arcs. So the Browns come to Paddington's rescue, a display of how much he's come to mean to them, and as each of their arcs is completed, we get a concrete example of how Paddington has helped each of them grow. It's tight storytelling, and it's all rooted in sincere emotions.
It's just so heartwarming. I'm going to cry just thinking about it.
Also, the finales of both movies contain wonderful homages to some of the best set pieces in the Mission Impossible series, which I love because that might be my favorite current action franchise. The first movie has a great nod to the Burj Khalifa sequence, and the second movie has a whole showdown on top of a speeding train. And speaking of the second movie, it does all of this, but even better. This one is about Paddington wanting to get a present for Aunt Lucy's 100th birthday. In the opening scene, we see how important she is to him, how she put her dreams of visiting London on hold to raise him. So he wants to finally show her the city by getting her this antique pop-up book about London. His motives are entirely selfless and pure, and opposing him is a villain driven entirely by selfishness and ego. And that villain is Hugh Grant. So we gotta talk about Hugh Grant now. For someone so famous, he's oddly underrated as an actor. He's mostly known for romantic comedies and stammering a lot.
I just was wondering whether You ever thought of having,
But he became famous for that because he's really flippin' good at it. I'm trying to watch my language because it's what Paddington would want. So, like Four Weddings and a Funeral or Notting Hill, he's great in those movies, but they kind of overshadow the great dramatic work he's done in movies like Bitter Moon or Sense and Sensibility or Cloud Atlas, where he plays a cannibal in one section. And Paddington 2 finally gives him the showcase he deserves. He's playing Phoenix Buchanan, amazing name, a British theater legend whose ego has become so immense that he can no longer stand to share the spotlight with anyone. He steals the book that Paddington wants to buy for Aunt Lucy because it contains clues to a hidden treasure that he wants to use to fund his triumphant return to the stage in a one-man show. The character is so big and theatrical and egotistical that it gives Grant amazing material to work with. I mean, like, every line he has in this movie is gold.
May my entrails be plucked forth and wound about my neck, should I deceive.
And he uses his acting ability and skill with costumes to disguise himself throughout the movie. So we get Hugh Grant as a nun, a bishop, a knight, and a homeless guy. And he would easily steal the entire movie if it wasn't for Brendan Gleeson.
Marmalade time.
So Paddington is falsely accused of stealing the book and sentenced to prison, which is full of violent criminals who are not charmed by him, and then he makes matters worse by accidentally dyeing all their uniforms pink, which really pisses them off. But then, he befriends Knuckles McGinty, the scariest, most hardened criminal in the prison. Now, Gleeson has always been great at playing intimidating, grumpy guys.
Now, the minister says you're too young to see what these curses do. I say different.
And this both turns that up to 11 and subverts it. There are few moments in recent cinematic memory as delightful as the first time Gleeson eats a marmalade sandwich.
What is this?
It's this section of the movie that proves to be the ultimate manifestation of Paddington's ability to see the good in everyone and turn every place he goes into a happier one. He turns the whole prison into a wonderful place full of delicious baked goods and bedtime stories. Paddington basically reforms the prison system in this movie. Because, as Aunt Lucy says,
if we are kind and polite, the world will be right.
If the first movie is about Paddington becoming a member of the community, in this one you see how important a member he is. He brings his neighbors breakfast, helps them study for exams, reminds them not to forget their keys, helps them fall in love, and washes their windows. And later on in the story, when he's in prison, you see how much the mood of the neighborhood has decayed in his absence. And just like the first movie, the story unfolds with clockwork precision. Every moment serves a purpose. Even the silliest scene, like Paddington's short stint working at a barber shop, has a payoff later in the story. Just like the first movie, everyone's skill set up at the beginning pays off in the end. Jonathan's love of steam trains, Mrs. Brown's swimming, Mr. Brown's yoga, and ability to throw coconuts, which I guess is like a British carnival thing? Sure. What I'm trying to say here is that the Paddington films are miracles. They are deeply sincere, truly funny stories about a bear from a faraway land who comes to a new country seeking a home. Without spoiling the end of the second movie, it's one of maybe 5 films that has produced actual tears in my eyes. Now look, I know some viewers get angry if I mention anything political or express an opinion on anything besides just movies, but the fact of the matter is that these movies are political. They're about an immigrant seeking a home in a new country who faces adversity and distrust, and through kindness and hard work becomes a valuable member of the community. In 2018, when the world is a nightmare and you've got politicians gaining power by encouraging a fear and distrust of outsiders, it is hugely important that movies like this exist.
Patrick, you know those people in the comments.
I don't care. I think someone should start a crowdfunding campaign to mail thousands of DVDs of Paddington to the US and British governments, because if anyone can get through to those people, I think it might be this little bear. And now I just want to revisit some of my favorite little moments from these movies. Like the music cue when Peter Capaldi sees Nicole Kidman for the first time.
Telephone box.
I'm terribly sorry.
Mr. Curry's home decor, Mr. Curry's anonymous voice.
This is an anonymous phone call.
Oh, hello, Mr. Curry.
The way Brendan Gleeson says marmalade.
Marmalade?
Marmalade.
Marmalade.
The taxidermist gag. How Mrs. Bird's special ability is just to drink heavily.
Go!
How the montage of Paddington seeing all the sights turns out to be the taxi driver taking them on an unreasonably long route and overcharging.
What sort of rig do you call that?
Well, young Bear said it was his first time in London. I thought I'd show him the sights.
when Kidman accidentally picks up a stuffed ferret instead of a phone.
Yes?
The Buckingham Palace guard with all the food in his hat. The shot of Paddington washing windows on the Shard. Richard Ayoade's amazing little appearance.
And a substance later identified as marmalade was found here.
Knuckles' knuckle tattoos. And of course, the greatest credit scene in film history. So yeah, better than any Marvel one.
Listen to the rain on the roof go. Blunk, blank, a blink, blunk, blank, a blink. Let's have a drink and shelter from the shower.
And since lists are fun, my top 5 performances in the Paddington films go Hugh Grant, Ben Whishaw, Brendan Gleeson, Sally Hawkins, Peter Capaldi. The Paddington movies are funnier than most comedies, more moving than most dramas, and more exciting than most action movies. If we're talking about the best sequels of all time, we got Godfather 2, Empire Strikes Back, Toy Story 2, Blade 2, and yeah, Paddington 2. So how many times have I said the word Paddington in the past 15 minutes?
46.
Okay, that seems right. So Dad, what do you say we relocate to the living room and watch the Paddington movies?
You should.
Now, you wanna try it again?
It's too thick, this bread. It's really, I was worried about this.
Just take a smaller bite. You'll be fine. Just don't try to eat half of it in one shot. Time out to make more toast!
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Now, as I'm sure you can tell, this series is a continuing story, and it's just gonna keep on going, because my parents love making them. So stay tuned for some exciting story developments. Now, if you're not already aware, we recently launched a podcast called We Heart Hartnett, exploring the filmography of the actor Josh Hartnett movie by movie. New episodes drop every Tuesday morning, and if you haven't already, you should go subscribe because it's pretty good. Now, as you might have seen, last week YouTube would not allow us to monetize the video because it contained profanity that obviously had to be in the video, and that kind of sucked. So if you want to support these videos and make it possible for us to keep on making them and keep making them better and better, you should pay a visit to the Patreon. It's a fun place. And finally, if you want to yell at me about stuff and get updates on the various things that we're working on, you should follow me on all the social media links. That's all, so I will see you next Wednesday.